What if I told you the strongest person you admire didn't become strong because life was fair to them, but because it wasn't? And what if the very thing that's holding you back right now is actually the exact thing that could make you unstoppable? That idea sounds uncomfortable, right? But then you look at someone like Maki Zenin from the anime Jujutsu Kaisen, and suddenly it starts to make sense. I've always wanted to talk about Maki for a long time, not just as a character, but as an idea. There was always something different about her story. It didn't feel like the usual work hard and get stronger type of journey. It felt harsher, more real. But every time I tried to break it down, something felt incomplete, like I was missing the actual point. And then the genuine plan arc took place. That moment didn't just show how powerful she became, it showed why she became that way. It connected everything like the rejection, the pain, the anger into something that finally made sense. And that's when I realized Maki's story isn't inspiring in the usual way. It's uncomfortable because it forces you to confront truths that most people avoid. There are brutal lessons hidden in her journey, not the kind that make you feel motivated for 5 minutes, but the kind that stay with you and slowly change how you see yourself and the world around you. So in this video, I want to break down those lessons one by one and show you what Maki Zenin's story is really trying to tell us. And trust me, you will want to stay till the end for this. So let's get started. Hidden potential often requires something to be removed. There's something uncomfortable about growth that no one really talks about. We are often told to add things to improve our lives, like more discipline, more habits, more effort. But what if the real reason you feel stuck isn't because you are lacking something, but because you are holding on to something you shouldn't? If you look at Maki, her story hits this point in the most painful way possible. For the longest time, she trained harder than everyone around her. She pushed her body beyond her limits, endured humiliation from her own family, and kept moving forward even when the system clearly wasn't built for her. But despite all that effort, there was still a roof she couldn't break through. And the truth is, it wasn't because she wasn't strong enough. It was because something was still holding her back. The connection with her twin sister, Mai, was more than simply emotional. It was restricting her potential. As long as that bond existed in that form, Maki could never become what she was capable of becoming. And then comes one of the most emotional moments in the story where Mai sacrifices herself. It's not a power of sin. It doesn't feel exciting. Instead, it feels heavy and unfair. Because in that moment, Maki doesn't gain something new. Instead, she loses something irreplaceable. But at the same time, that loss removes the final barrier that was holding her back. And suddenly, she transforms into something completely different. And that's the part that hits hard. Because in real life, this isn't just fiction. Think about how a rocket works. When it launches, it doesn't carry all its part all the way into the space. The boosters that help it lift off are powerful, necessary even. But only for a certain stage. Once their job is done, they are detached and left behind. Not because they are useless, but because carrying them further would prevent the rocket from reaching the orbit. Maki was stuck in the exact state. Her potential was there, but it was locked behind something she didn't choose. And until that bond was broken, her true strength couldn't exist. It wasn't about becoming more, it was about finally being free from what was limiting her. And if you really sit down with that idea, it hits differently. Because a lot of people right now are in the same situation, just in a different form. You might be working hard, trying to improve, trying to become better, but there's something in your life quietly holding you back. It could be a relationship that drains you more than it supports you. It could be an environment that keeps you comfortable but small. It could even be a version of yourself that you have gotten used to, even though you know deep down it's not how you want to be anymore. And the truth is, no matter how much you add on top of that, the result doesn't change. Because the limitation is still there. Maki didn't become powerful because she gained something new. She became powerful because something that was holding her back was taken away. And yes, it was painful. It wasn't fair. It wasn't something she would have chosen, but it was real. And that's what makes this lesson brutal. Growth is not always about building. Sometimes it's about letting go. And sometimes what you need to let go of is the very thing that you are most attached to. Maki didn't get that choice, but you do. And the next is that respect is rarely given, it is usually taken. There's a moment in life when you realize that no matter how much effort you put in or how much disciplined you are, people still don't see you the way you see yourself. In Jujutsu Kaisen, the Zenin clan isn't just any family. It's one of the most powerful sorcerer clans obsessed with hierarchy, bloodline, and most importantly, cursed energy. In their world, your worth is decided the moment you are born. If you have strong curse techniques, you are respected. If you don't, you are nothing. And Maki was born with almost none. So it didn't matter how hard she trained or how skilled she became with weapons. In the eyes of the Zenin clan, she had already failed before she even started. To them, she wasn't just weak, she was an embarrassment to their name. And now here's where it gets interesting. Most people, when they're treated like that, try harder to prove themselves. They think that if they work harder, they will finally gain respect. Maki did that too. She trained relentlessly and pushed her body beyond what others could handle. But nothing changed. The clan didn't suddenly accept her and also didn't start respecting her effort. And that's the harsh lesson. Respect is rarely given just because you deserve it. It's not handed out as a reward for being hardworking or even kind or talented. Sometimes people are too stuck in their beliefs, systems, and ego, just like the Zenin clan. Their system was designed in such a way that someone like Maki could never win, no matter what she did. So Maki stopped trying to earn their respect. She didn't beg for validation. She didn't try to fit in their system anymore. Instead, she focused on becoming so strong that their opinion stopped mattering altogether. And eventually, she became someone they couldn't ignore, even if they wanted to. Now, if you bring this into real life, think about someone working in an office where promotions are less about performance and more about favoritism. You could be the hardest worker in the room, the most reliable person, the one who stays late and fixes everything. But somehow you are still overlooked. Not because you are not good enough, but because the system isn't built to recognize you. But Maki's story suggests something different. Instead of chasing respect, you build something so undeniable that people are forced to recognize you. Not because they want to, but because they can't ignore it. There's a concept in the book, The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, that connects perfectly with this. He talks about how power and respect are often tied to perception and not just effort. People don't always respond to what you are trying to be. They respond to what you have already proven. And most people will not listen until your results speak for themselves. Maki embodies this in the most extreme way. She didn't stand in front of the Zenin clan and ask them to acknowledge her. Instead, she became so powerful, so overwhelming, that the very system that rejected her couldn't exist anymore. And while we are not living in a world full of curses or clans, this principle still applies. Sometimes the solution isn't to fight for respect. It is to build yourself to a level where respect becomes automatic. Then comes the system is not always broken. It was never built for you. The third lesson is a little uncomfortable because it forces you to question something most people never do. When you look at Maki, it's very easy to say she worked hard and became strong. But that's not the real story. The real story is more harsh. She was born into a system that had already decided her worth before she even tried. The Zenin clan valued curse techniques, bloodline power, and inherited ability, and Maki had none of that. So no matter how much effort she put in, no matter how disciplined she became, in their eyes, she was already a failure. And this is where most people make mistakes in real life. They keep trying to prove themselves inside systems that were never built for them. A student who is naturally creative keeps forcing himself to excel in a rigid academic structure that solely rewards memorization. Someone who wants to build something of their own keeps chasing validation from people who don't even understand that path. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If the system cannot recognize your strengths, then even your best will look like average there. Maki understood this whether consciously or not. She didn't sit there and complain about how unfair the Zenin clan was. She didn't keep trying to win using curse technique just to prove a point. Instead, she shifted the entire game. She built a kind of strength that the system couldn't measure, couldn't control, and eventually couldn't ignore. Her physical ability became so overwhelming that the very thing that made her weak turned into the reason she became unstoppable. Therefore, she didn't win inside the system, she made the system irrelevant. And you see this happening in real life more than you think. There are people who struggle for years in academics, barely passing, constantly feeling like they are not good enough. But the moment they step into something like design, business, fitness, or content creation, they suddenly start thriving. Not because they magically became smarter, but because they finally stepped into an environment where their strengths actually mattered. The problem was never their capability, it was the system they were trying to win in. This idea is actually explained really well in the book called Range by David Epstein, in which the author talks about how people who don't fit into traditional systems often end up becoming exceptional in other areas, but only when they stop forcing themselves into narrow path and start exploring their own strengths. Therefore, what looks like failure in one system can actually be the beginning of success in another. And that's exactly what Maki represents. She could have spent her entire life trying to prove herself in a system that would never accept her. But instead, she chose to build something that didn't need their approval in the first place. So if you ever feel like you are falling behind or like no matter how hard you try, it's not enough, then take a step back and ask yourself one question. Am I actually failing, or am I just playing a game that was never meant for me? Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is not to try harder, but to become powerful in a way that the system cannot measure. And finally, becoming exceptional is often a lonely path. See, becoming exceptional is not just about getting stronger, it's about slowly becoming someone that fewer and fewer people can relate to. If you look at Maki, her journey wasn't just painful because she was weak in the beginning, it was painful because she was alone almost the entire time. Her own family didn't just doubt her, they rejected her. And after that, she didn't just grow stronger, she changed completely. And that's the part most people miss. When Maki finally awakens and wipes out the Zenin clan, it's not just a moment of revenge. It's the moment she becomes someone who no longer belongs to the world she came from. She becomes something else entirely. And that's where the real lesson begins, because in real life, people around you don't always grow with you. Some people will misunderstand you, but they won't say it directly. They will just feel like you have become different. Some people will feel uncomfortable around you because your discipline reminds them of what they are not doing. And some people will quietly start resenting you, not because you did something wrong, but because your growth highlights their weakness. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is often a sign that you are moving in a direction that most people are not willing to go. There is actually a psychological concept behind this, and it's called social homeostasis. Just like the body tries to maintain a stable temperature, social groups try to maintain a stable identity. When one person in that group starts changing rapidly, the group unconsciously tries to pull them back to the normal version of themselves. That's why when someone suddenly becomes disciplined or ambitious, they might hear things like, "You have changed," or "Why are you acting like this?" It's not always a worry, sometimes it's a rejection. Therefore, the loneliness that comes with growth is not accidental, it's a part of the process. If you look at high performers in real life, whether it's athletes, creators, or entrepreneurs, many of them go through a phase where their circle becomes smaller. Not because they hate people, but because their priorities, habits, and mindset no longer align with everyone around them. And this is where most people stop. They start feeling that loneliness and they interpret it as a sign that something is wrong. So they slow down, they go back to their comfort zone and they become relatable again. But Maki didn't do that. She didn't try to go back. She accepted that the path she chose would isolate her, and she kept walking anyway. And that acceptance is what made her truly powerful. So if there's something practical you can take from this, it's this. When you start improving your life, don't just prepare for discipline, prepare for distance, and understand that not everyone is supposed to come with you to the next version of your life. Some people are part of your story, not your destination. Therefore, instead of seeing loneliness as something negative, start seeing it as a feedback. It's telling you that you are stepping into a space where fewer people exist, and that's exactly where growth happens. At the end of it all, Maki's story isn't something you watch and feel comfortable about. It's something that stays with you, because it shows you a version of growth that most people don't talk about. The kind that doesn't look pretty, doesn't feel fair, and definitely doesn't come without a cost. But at the same time, it makes one thing very clear. Becoming exceptional isn't just about getting stronger. It's about what you are willing to lose, what you are willing to let go of, and who you are willing to become in the process. And therefore, the real question isn't whether you can grow. It is whether you are ready to face what comes with it. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.